An anthology about the bad, the short lived, and the forgotten shows and events in television history. This is It Was a Thing on TV.
Punisher! Control!
Harry, before I change my mind!
I give you Super Train.
Episode 477, submission number 1792. The Girl with Something Extra. The Girl with Something Extra aired on NBC from September 14th of 1973 to March 15th of 1974 for 22 episodes. That's your traditional crock block plus 6. Or 2 crock blocks minus 10. Or 3 crock blocks minus 26. Do the math. I don't care. Now, if you have it handy, Greg, what else have we covered from 1973? I don't think that's an era we've really gone too deep in. I know Lots of Luck we definitely covered, but what else from 73 if you got it handy?
Okay, we covered Baffled with Leonard Nimoy.
Oh, that's right. Wait, Baffle?
Yeah, Baffled. That's the pilot where Leonard Nimoy gains psychic abilities.
Oh, Baffled. I thought you said Baffle, not Baffled. I thought you were talking about the game show from 1973 called Baffle.
No.
Okay, I got it now. But what else have we covered from 73?
The Genesis 2 pilot back in episode 250. Star Trek the Animated Series, and Lots of Luck. So this is the 5th entry starting in 73. Sally Field, she's got something extra, something extra, something extra. And also starring is John Davidson.
Oh my
Something
goodness.
extra, something extra. Ding.
That, folks, was not the theme song. It was a great synopsis of the show, but it wasn't the theme song. And I gotta give you credit. You do those Paul Schaefer-like songs really well. That sounds like something Paul Schaefer would do. Hey, Dave, something extra, something extra. Oh my gosh. Oh, it's gonna be one of those shows. Chico said we're gonna, do our best next week with a little extra, and I don't think that's exactly what he meant. But anyhow, it's 1973, and we've talked about in the past that ESP, Sixth Sense type of stuff was like really popular in the 70s and the late 60s. We talked about Uri Geller, the fraud. We'll just get that out of the way.
Piece of one trick pony.
Like I said, the fraud.
He is a
And I know I've mentioned in the past that Kreskin, the amazing Kreskin, back in like the late 60s or early 60s, he had an ESP game. And actually, that was like one of the few board games my sister had. And I actually have it downstairs in the basement. Kreskin's ESP. I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but my sister was into that for some reason. But also, obviously, we talked about mind readers. Now, admittedly, that's 6 years in the future. But still, there's ESP coming into play. So now we've got this series, a comedy about a character, a female with ESP. And basically, it's just your regular situation comedy. Nothing really special about it, except it's a newly married couple, and she has ESP. Whoop-de-doo. And really, I mean, that's the best way I can like phrase this series after seeing a number of episodes is whoop-de-doo. I mean, there's nothing special. I can tell you that I did not laugh a single time during any of the episodes I saw. It just was not funny. And, well, if you've got a situation comedy, Well, the second word there is the most important aspect, the comedy. Bring the laughs. We'll get into some of the hijinks a little later that our characters get into because there are some hijinks for a while, but then the whole ESP thing sort of takes a back seat. Maybe because just you can't do good comedy about ESP, or maybe it's too predictable. Who knows? But we have a number of very, very well known actors on this series, specifically the lead couple. I'm going to start off with John Burton, who is the husband, played by Greg. I'll let you have the honors. Who played John Burton in this series?
Who played John Burton in this series? Well, you know what, Mike? How about we have Shadow himself say it? Hey, Shadow, who played John Burton in this series?
I did not expect that. I thought I'd have to put that in the edit in post, but beautifully done. I was actually surprised you didn't say it, but Shadow did a great job as always. So yeah, John Davison played John Burton in this series. Again, new husband, just married his wife Sally Burton, and it's supposed to be about her ESP, but like I said, it sort of goes off the beaten path reasonably quickly. And of course, John Davison, where you would know him from, beyond Hollywood Squares, obviously. He was a frequent substitute host on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson back in the day. He was also a frequent square on the Hollywood Squares. He had the John Davidson Show, a talk show back in the early 80s. He's done a lot of touring on Broadway. I remember he was touring with Wicked. Oh gosh, this must be about 10, 12 years ago. He was touring in a national production. And again, story time with Mikey now. Somebody that I grew up with, a good friend, actually the sister of a friend of mine, was in the cast of that touring production. So she worked with John Davidson. I forget what role she played, and I don't know anything about Wicked. I want to say that John Davidson actually played like the wizard or whoever the main antagonist is. But so he's staying busy, and actually, oh gosh, this must be about a year ago or 6 months ago. I was doing a little search on John Davidson, and it appears that every week he performs, sings, plays music in his restaurant. I don't think it's a club. I think it's more of a bar in like Vermont or New Hampshire. So he's staying busy, and he's well into his 80s at this point.
Yeah.
John performs at, and this is the name of the location. This isn't an item on the menu. He performs at Club Sandwich, which is actually in the city of Sandwich, New Hampshire.
Oh, that's terrific.
And all the shows are live stream on YouTube. So, and you have to pay $10 for it. He's out there. He'll be 83 this year. And actually, it says here, this is going to be like his last go. This is it. It's time for the grand finale of Club Sandwich. This cozy barn performance club in Sandwich, New Hampshire has been a dream of mine and my most successful project so far. I want to finish Club Sandwich with a bang. I'll be 83 this year, seriously, and who knows what the future holds. I may do an encore, but for now, it is time to end the show. And it looks like the last show is going to be September 14th of this year. Room capacity is 50 people. After show, John's available for photos and to autograph any merchandise. Okay. Gosh, this is going to sound absolutely crazy, but maybe there's a road trip this summer there. I don't know if I really want to go like 8-10 hours away to see John Davidson, but I've done stupider things, so who knows? So yeah, if you're in New Hampshire, go to Sandwich, New Hampshire, and see John Davidson perform. 83 years old. I cannot believe that.
Wow.
10 hours and 34 minutes from my house. I don't know if I want to drive that long or go that far, but that would make a damn interesting road trip, just saying. But hey, there is somebody else on this show besides John Davidson playing his wife, Sally. Somebody you may know. Definitely a legend of both the small screen and the big screen. Talking about the one and only Sally Field. Where could we start with her career? I mean, seriously, she's done so much that, yeah, I don't want to leave off anything of great importance. We could start off with, since we're talking about television shows, she was the Flying Nun before she was the girl with something extra. But also in terms of movies, just so many. Forrest Gump and Steel Magnolias, Smokey and the Bandit. I say this in the nicest way possible, even though this is not going to be something she'll be remembered for. 80 for Brady. I feel guilty just saying that. 80 for Brady.
That piece of shit.
Well, that's the best way of describing it. It looks stupid. It looks stupider than Barbie, in my opinion. Yes, I said it, and I have no regrets.
Oh, hold on a second. Let me tease something. If you think we love on Tom Brady, just wait until we hit on Tom Brady roast in the Year in Review show.
He's not wrong there. And also Punchline with Tom Hanks, if you remember that. But just so many good movies. And again, even some good TV shows. Oh, how could I forget Gidget? One person who appears on every episode that I'm going to add is Jerry Burton, who happens to be John Burton's brother. So John Davidson's brother on this TV series. And he is portrayed by Jack Sheldon, not with us any longer, but he has a big distinction in television history. And I don't think Greg knows this, so this is probably going to blow his mind a little bit. So, Jack Sheldon, the one place that you'd really know him from, Greg, if you ever seen Schoolhouse Rock, and I know you've seen Schoolhouse Rock.
Yeah.
If you've ever seen I'm Only a Bill, he voiced the Bill. So when he's saying, I'm only a Bill sitting on Capitol Hill, that's him. That is Jack Leonard. And actually, if you remember Family Guy, the spoof they did, this is about 14, 15 years ago, I think in one of the cutaways, he voiced the Bill in that cutaway. And actually, I'm sorry, I said like 14, 15 years ago. It was like 2000. So that was 20, good heavens, 24 years ago, 23 years ago, it's 2001. Mr. Griffin Goes to Washington. So that is like his primary claim to fame. He voiced the Bill in Schoolhouse Rock, among other voices on Schoolhouse Rock. But he also, in the spoof, when Peter Griffin went to Washington to be a congressman, he voiced the Bill that gets poked by somebody picking up litter with this, stick with a pointed end on it. He's not the biggest name, but he has a place in history that basically everybody our age remembers vividly. I'm going to throw out one more name because this person appears on 18 of the episodes. Anne is played by Zora Lampert. And Zora Lampert, she was on a little bit of many things. She was on Kojak, 2 different episodes. But just going through her IMDb, she was not on many episodes of much of anything. I see 5 episodes of Romance Theater back in 1982, whatever that was. Use your imagination, I think. 13 episodes of Doctor's Hospital in 1975 and 76. That's really it. I mean, she's got like 1 or 2 episodes on many series going all the way back to the 50s, and she is still with us, believe it or not, at age 94. So we're going to do this a little bit differently, going over the episodes. Yes, we'll talk about the episodes. We'll talk about some of the capsules. And one thing you'll notice is Chico is not here with us. I will divine the spirit of Chico magically through telepathy, telekinesis, whatever. Go tell a friend. I don't know. But I will summon Chico to comment about each episode. So we're going to start off with episode 1. And this is the Genesis story, if you will. This is When They Get Married, called Sally on My Mind.
Written by series creator Bernard Slade, Sally creates turmoil on her wedding night by telling John that she can read his mind.
I'm sorry, on the honeymoon, that's where it's discovered she has ESP? I'm sorry, I've got other things on my mind than ESP on my honeymoon. Just saying.
Why couldn't she have mentioned it on the first date?
Maybe she was in some sort of accident and got the ESP for the wedding. I don't know. Maybe, she, tried throwing the bouquet and the bouquet had like a heavy weight in it. And it hit her in the head and she suddenly gained ESP powers. I have no idea. But yeah, that's an interesting sort of story to say on your wedding night. We've been dating for years and, oh, honey, did you know I have ESP? Come again? I've got ESP. I can read your mind. Again, as you said, you'd think it would come up a little bit sooner. Whatever. Again, just the way this first episode is like set up, this sort of doesn't like bode well because, Greg just like pointed out a big flaw. You're just finding out about her ESP on the wedding night? Plus, also, I'm curious, how does the ESP get discovered on the wedding night? I don't want to know. Hey, honey, are you thinking what I'm thinking? Yeah, you want to me. How'd you know that? Something like that. Man, the censor button's getting to work out so early. Episode 2 is called Everything You Wanted to Hide and Couldn't. All right, Chico, I'm summoning you. Woo!
Newlyweds John and Sally experience extraordinary friction as Sally knows when John is thinking about other women, which causes a strain in their relationship.
John Davidson, what are you doing looking at other women? You're a married man. We're going to move on to episode 3. Episode 3 is called A Gift for the Gifted. I'm summoning Chico again. I wonder if Chico's, sensors are going off. He's not with us tonight, but wherever he is. Oh, I'm getting some sort of ping that Mike needs me. I better go help him out.
John finds it difficult to hide Sally's birthday present because, the ESP.
So, yeah, that happened. We do have a name in this episode. Maybe not a big name, but a name nonetheless that I'm sure everybody may recognize in some capacity. Playing Angela in this episode, and actually she is a semi-frequent character. This happens to be the first episode she's on, but playing Angela in this episode is Stephanie Edwards. She's been on television for a long time, not really known for anything big in terms of acting, but where you might know her is she has broadcast, I think with Bob Eubanks of all people. I'm sure there are other people besides Bob Eubanks, but she has been part of the presenters of the Tournament of Roses parade for years. I know I've seen the Tournament of Roses parade on New Year's Day on different networks, not even local networks. I want to say like HGTV showed some. But yeah, she is one of the broadcasters, one of the primary broadcasters of the Tournament of Roses parade. Specifically, it appears it's on KTLA. But she has been doing this for a very long time. I'm sorry, John, if I took your phrase there.
For a very long time.
I see it going back to at least 1982, if not sooner. And the most recent attributed to her on IMDb is 2014. So there's 32 years there. So she's sort of a staple of New Year's Day. Turn on the parade, and then you watch some bowl games. So she definitely has a spot in the television zeitgeist. Episode 4 is How Green Was Las Vegas? Chico, what are your thoughts about this?
Sally uses her ESP to help Jerry, her brother-in-law, because, he's John's brother, win at gambling.
John's brother, he needs money. I think he needs like $500 or something, I don't know, to cover some debt. I was not really paying 100% attention to the start of the episode. So Sally and John, they go to a casino, and John's brother Jerry, he's like a singer, a performer in Vegas. And after a show, Jerry goes to them and says, "Hey, I need money." So Sally goes to the table and she plays blackjack for $5. And she does this after seeing a person playing blackjack, and she says, "I know the dealer's down card. That's the 8 of diamonds." And so it was an ace that was facing up. That was his whole card. And the card is turned over, and it's the 8 of diamonds. And, boy, we should all be surprised, but, she's got ESP, and only her and John Davidson know about it. So once the seat comes open, she plays $5 because that's the minimum bet at this blackjack table. Plays a hand, wins, it's $10. Next hand, she's got like 21 blackjack. And actually, I should go back to the first hand. She was dealt 2 queens, and she hit on 2 queens and got an ace. So she got a natural blackjack on the second hand and, doubled her money, or whatever the payout is, 2-1 because it was blackjack. And so she just kept on playing. And then after a certain amount of time, didn't say how long she played, she ended up with $5,000. But she had a bit of a guilty complex because she didn't necessarily do this in the most ethical of ways. There may have been a little luck involved, but the thing is, if she has ESP, she can focus on what card is coming out next. So she felt a little guilty because she was using her powers, her ESP talents, for, let's say, not so good stuff, making a profit. So the way she gets back at the house, she wants to give back the money because she has this little, like I said, complex. She doesn't feel the money was properly earned, if you will. She used her abilities for not the best purposes. So she tried losing the money and let John Davidson, let his character gamble on roulette. So he put $5,000 on red. They spin the roulette wheel, and it comes up red. He doubles the money to $10,000. Okay, I got to get rid of this money. So he plays again, put all $10,000 on red, spins the wheel, and it comes up red again. So they're up to $20,000. But at this point, they're sort of raising the ire of all the casino employees. And they actually are told, we'd like to talk to you in the back about, your luck because there's something shady going on. And so they finally tell the people running the casino, Sally's got ESP. And the people at the casino are like, "You're full of you-know-what." I don't even remember if there's any closure in terms of giving the money back. But the thing is, you can see it's predictable because, she's got ESP. She goes to Vegas and just wins everything. Like I said about the series, it's just not that funny. But we do have names in this episode. Oh, do we have names? And actually a story behind one of those names. So the first person I'm going to mention is the casino manager himself, is played by Mark Leonard. And Mark Leonard, and I told Greg this earlier, is really well known within the Star Trek universe because he played Spock's dad, Sarek, on many things. So he is a definite big piece of the Star Trek universe. Playing a second dealer. So I don't know if this was the blackjack dealer in the second time. She played blackjack a second time, so I'm guessing this might be the dealer for the second time. Is a gentleman by the name of Eddie Carroll. Not a very well-known name, but he has one role, and he did this for a very long time.
For a very long time.
Oh, there's a very long time again. I'm suddenly channeling my John Davidson. But he did play one role for a lengthy amount of time. He was the voice of Jiminy Cricket in many Disney things. Just taking a look really fast. He was the voice of Jiminy Cricket on The Magical World of Disney. He was the voice of Jiminy Cricket in Mickey's Christmas Carol. Many Disney sing-along videos and VHS releases back in the 80s and 90s. And he even did the voice of Jiminy Cricket in House of Mouse back in the early 2000s, but also in the Kingdom Hearts franchise, if you've ever played that. So Jiminy Cricket was a dealer. But the third name, by far, is the biggest name. There's a story here. Playing Carol is Farrah Fawcett. The story here is that apparently Farrah Fawcett's footage ended up on the cutting room floor, yet she still got a credit for being on the show, because I saw this episode. It is on YouTube. I did not see Farrah Fawcett anywhere. So the only logical explanation is they edited her out for whatever reason. And I'm guessing she wouldn't have had that much of a role. I'm guessing Casino, and given Farrah Fawcett's beauty, she may have been like a cocktail waitress. And there was no cocktail waitress at all on this show. Like I said, didn't even see Farrah Fawcett at all. So she got a credit, even though it's very possible that it ended up on the cutting room floor. So that will take us to episode 5, which is titled All the Nudes That's Fit to Print. Surprise us, Chico. I think I know what we're going to be talking about.
Sally feels jealousy when John is asked to pose nude for a woman's magazine. Fun fact, John Davidson used to be an underwear model. Just want to point that out.
This is timely because remember, John Davidson did a nude pictorial for Cosmopolitan, I believe around this time, 1973, 1974. I do want to know how ESP comes into play in this. I'm not going to touch it with a forklift, though. We do have Stephanie Edwards touring as Angela again. But we have one name as himself. I'm guessing he may be playing like the publisher. I don't think this is online, so this is a little bit of an assumption. But playing himself in this episode is Merv Griffin. If I have to tell you who Merv Griffin is, why are we even here? Created Wheel of Fortune, created Jeopardy, hosted his own talk show for ages in the 60s, 70s, and up to the mid-80s. He's a very well-known personality. And not just a personality, singer, host, creator, as I said, and also an entrepreneur. Because he did have a couple of resorts back in the day. Episode 6, John and Sally and Fred and Linda.
John and Sally discover that their eager new friends lack common interests and are, at least popularly, the most boring couple in town.
We do have 2 very well-known names appearing in this episode. Playing Fred Fowler is Pat Harrington Jr., Schneider from One Day at a Time. So this would have been like what, 2 years before One Day at a Time.
Yeah.
And of course, Pat Harrington's known for much more than that. But people of a certain age would definitely know Pat Harrington as the Super Schneider on One Day at a Time back in the 70s and 80s. But playing Mimi in this episode, again, very well-known personality, Carol Wayne. Where would we know her from? Well, first off, she was like one of the big celebrities on Celebrity Sweepstakes back in the day, which we've referred to in the past. But also, you would know her as the original Tea Time lady on the Art Fern Tea Time movie segments on Johnny Carson. She was that sort of airheaded blonde who was basically Johnny's foil in those segments. If you don't know what I'm talking about, do a little search on YouTube. Classic segments. Anytime there's a Tea Time movie with Art Fern. Funny, funny stuff. Episode 7. One of our hens is missing? What?
Every year, John's mom sends him a chocolate hen, which leads to a marital spat after Sally mistakenly gives away the hen to a neighborhood boy.
I'll say it again. What?
This is where we need the gif of the dog.
I should explain. One of our favorite gifs that we use in our little chat is a dog that sort of gives a look like, huh? And it says what underneath. So really, that dog, that image would be so appropriate here. What? I think that's the best way of describing it. We do actually have a name here. We only have one guest in this episode compared to the regular cast, but oh, what a guest this is. Playing Amber. And again, people of a certain age will recognize the name. And again, if not, do a little bit of research because she was very well known in the 80s. Terry Garr. Again, what can we say about her? She was in Tootsie, Mr. Mom, Young Frankenstein. Not Frankenstein, Frankenstein. She was one of David Letterman's favorite guests back in the 80s and 90s. She was on Letterman reasonably frequently. But again, if you're not of a certain age, look who she is. She is a veritable legend, even if she hasn't really been in the public eye the last 20 to 25 years. I'm sure she's been around, but her big time was in the mid to late 80s. Episode 8 is titled No Benefit of Doubt.
John faces a dilemma with a client after Sally's ESP reveals whether she is innocent or guilty.
Would it be wrong if I put in from Cop Rock, he's guilty here?
Yeah. Well, actually, you can put it in.
But I just want your opinion because I would actually think about putting that in here, but
Yeah.
can't believe we're getting so much mileage out of that he's guilty clip, especially over the last week or so. In terms of special guests, we do have a couple of names. First, playing the judge in this episode is Peggy McKay. She's one of those people that you'd know from the stories. Specifically, she played Carolyn Brady on 1,572 episodes of Days of Our Lives from 1983 to 2016. But beyond that, again, another big name playing Mr. Everett on this episode is William Shallert. He played the father on the Patty Duke Show. He played Martin Lane. Again, among other TV shows. He was on TV for a very... Why do I keep going back to the John... I'm doing this sort of subconsciously, going back to John David and saying, he's going to be here for a very long time. But no, seriously, William Shallert was on TV for a very long time.
For a very long time.
Not joking, and I apologize if my invocation of John Davidson is getting a little tiring, but I mean, there's really no better way to describe somebody who had started on TV back in 1951.
Now, Mike, I need to note something.
Okay.
He was in the Trouble with Tribbles episode of Star Trek with Charlie Brill. And you know what I got? That I think I mentioned in eBay Price is Right.
I know what you got.
Yeah, the duo signed card with him and Charlie Brill in Star Trek Rittenhouse.
Yeah, I think you've shared that in the past. Moving on to episode 9. And Baby Makes 2. Oh, I think somebody's getting pregnant.
Sally's unmarried friend, Anne, wants a baby and tries to find the ideal father.
We don't have anybody of note in that episode, so we're going to just skip forward to episode 10. It's so peaceful in the country.
A heavy rain ruins the Burtons' country weekend.
We do have a name in this episode, believe it or not. Playing Bruno in this episode is Rick Hurst. Rick Hurst, he was Cletus Hogg on 55 episodes of The Dukes of Hazzard. So I'm guessing Cletus Hogg is Boss Hogg's son. Something like that.
Now hold on, Mike. Did they talk about Bruno in this episode?
This episode isn't on YouTube as far as I know, so I can't really comment on that.
Do you get the joke? We don't talk about Bruno.
Not really, I'm sorry.
Oh, damn it. Chico were here, he'd get it.
Well, he's not, so I'm sorry. But I will add that Rick Hurst, beyond Dukes of Hazzard, he was on 13 episodes of a series we're going to cover in the reasonably near future, Amanda's. Episode 11 is entitled Sugar and Spice and Quarterback Sneak.
Sally's football-playing tomboy niece has trouble relating to old-fashioned John.
I'm going to give one name, not a big character, not a famous actor or actress, but playing the mother in this episode is Allison McKay. I'm only mentioning her for one reason, because she was in one of the big films of this year, Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. Ms. Mikowski. Episode 12 is entitled Minding Mama.
Sally tries hard to make a good impression on John's mother, who is determined to dislike her new daughter-in-law.
Oh, great. She's meeting the mother-in-law. Terry Garr returns as Amber in this episode, but we do have another name. Just playing a policeman in this episode is Ronnie Shell, a legendary comic actor, if you don't know who Ronnie Shell is. Probably best known for Gomer Pyle USMC, where he played Duke Slater for 92 episodes. He was also in the series Good Morning World back in 1967 and 68 for 26 episodes. I think that might be on the list. I'm not 100% sure about that. But again, reasonably popular name, especially if you are a fan of older TV shows. And still with us, actually, at 92 years old. Episode 13 is A Meeting of the Minds.
John is tired of being dull and predictable, and having a wife who can read his mind is making matters worse.
I can understand that. The predictability actually makes things very predictable and kind of boring and bland. So it's not too weird that maybe he's a little, like, disenfranchised, if you will. We do have one name in this episode, beyond everybody else who's appeared on the series. And we've talked about him quite a bit, not in this episode, obviously, but in other TV shows, playing Arthur. And this would have been, probably not too long before he would probably get the role which really he is most known for, with all due respect. We'll get to why in a second. But we're talking about Jack Riley. Actually, it says he started on Bob Newhart show in 1972. So this actually coincided with the Bob Newhart show. Elliot Carlin, the neurotic, if you remember him from the Bob Newhart show. But again, people of a certain age, of a younger age, would know him as the voice of Stu Pickles. And I'm sure that's where Greg best knows him from, and I'm sure Chico best knows him from there too.
Oh, yes.
And if you don't recognize the name, you've seen Jack Riley. If you saw the face, you'd recognize him. I know he was on Night Court, OG Night Court, because he isn't with us any longer. He was on Married with Children, where he played like a homicidal birthday clown. A very Married with Children type of thing to do. But also, even this morning, when I was watching a first season rerun of Too Close for Comfort, his name is right there. He was on a first season episode of Too Close for Comfort. Don't even remember what the episode was about or what he did. I just remember seeing his name in the credits. So now that they're done with the first 13 episodes, let's see if things change a little bit. Because at this point, there would have been a time slot change. We'll talk about time slot and competition later on. But 13 episodes are done, and this takes us into 1974. And we're going to start off with Guess Who's Feeding the Pigeons?
Sally befriends a kindly old gentleman with a shady past.
The shady past? He was a mob boss. Oh, Sally, inviting a mob boss to dinner. But, oh, do we have names on this episode? I'm looking, I see 1, 2, 3 quality names. I think we'll start off with Detective Flavin first, played by Gary Crosby. First off, Bing Crosby's son, so I think that's a pretty important reason to mention his name. But he had been in many things. Hasn't been with us for close to 30 years. But Gary Crosby, he, like I said, did a little bit of everything. He did the talk show circuit and game show circuits back in the 70s. Obviously, being the son of Bing Crosby will get you that type of stuff.
Now, hold on. Would that make him technically the brother of Mary Crosby?
No, it doesn't say that he's the brother of Mary Crosby.
Huh.
One credit I will mention for Gary Crosby that is definitely not insignificant. He played Officer Ed Wells on 23 episodes of Adam 12. So he wasn't just a name because he happened to be Bing Crosby's kid. To make sense of all this, Bing Crosby's first wife, Dixie Lee, she gave birth to Gary Crosby in 1933. She was married to Bing from 1930 to 1952 when she passed. Mary Crosby looks like she was born in 59, and that was with the second wife, Catherine Grant, who was married to Bing Crosby from 1957 up until his death in 1977. So, not siblings technically, but step siblings, if you will, or half siblings, or I don't know the familial relationship, but
Half siblings.
like I said. So now that we got that out of the way, there are other names I want to mention. Because I said there were 3 names, 3 big names. The second of which is Mr. McClintock, and I'm not putting him in the hall, but darn it, Greg, he's got to get there one day. Gordon Jump. Be careful at the bike shop, kids. Nothing about the bike shop? Okay.
Yeah, stay the away from that bike shop.
And finally, and I am not purposely saving this for last, this is just in the order of IMDb, but playing Victor Lucas, who may very well be possibly the mob boss. Boy, if this isn't a great mob boss, I don't know who is. Greg, sit down. Keenan Wynn.
Oh, of course he'd be the mob boss. He's freaking Alonzo P. Hawk. Hold on a second. I just thought of something, Mike. What if Keenan Wynn was responsible for giving Gordon Jump the money for the bike shop?
Oh, I thought you were going to say something different. I thought you were going to say that Supertrain is a mob enterprise.
Well, that too. But hold on a minute. Let's remember Mr. Drummond worked for the company that Keenan Wynn ran in Supertrain. Remember, Supertrain and Different Strokes are in the same universe. Though, it is entirely possible that Keenan Wynn gave Gordon Jump the money to start that bike shop.
He's absolutely right, though. The company that Mr. Drummond worked for was the company that created the Super Train. So indisputable facts there. How would Keenan Wynn sleep at night if he knew that his money was being put towards the bike shop that Gordon Jump ran?
But that would explain why Gordon Jump got all those like full-sized arcade machines.
That actually makes perfectly good sense. So that's going to take us now to episode 15, The Greening of Aunt Fran.
Sally's eccentrically flamboyant Aunt Fran visits.
This is another one of the episodes that's on YouTube, and this, I think, was sort of where I drew the line because, again, this was not funny. I did not laugh once throughout any of the episodes, specifically this one. It just wasn't funny, and really, the ESP didn't come into play, at least from what I saw, because, again, not lying here, I saw the first maybe 10 minutes and then just hit like the fast forward button, try and see if there's anything of importance, and there isn't. So maybe the ESP factor is slowly dissipating at this point. But we have two names here. One sort of big name, and another name, maybe as a supporting actor, you might recognize. So playing that aunt that is visiting Sally, Aunt Fran, is Eve Arden, who you would best know as television's Our Miss Brooks. She played Connie Brooks on 130 episodes of Our Miss Brooks back in the 50s. And playing Stuart Klein in this episode is William Wyndham. He played a variety of roles, but again, I think where he might best be known is he was a supporting character on Murder, She Wrote. Played Dr. Seth Hazlitt and Sam Breen on 53 episodes of Murder, She Wrote. Also voiced Uncle Chuck on the cartoon version of Sonic the Hedgehog. But again, his career goes back a long way. He's done seemingly everything. Episode 16, The Cost of Giving.
The Burtons are celebrating their first anniversary, and after Sally sells her antique brooch to buy John's anniversary gift, he tries to recover it.
Again, a pair of names in this episode. Pretty big names. Playing the auctioneer, presuming that he is the person who sells this brooch, is It Was a Thing on TV Hall of Famer, Carl Ballantine. He's been on many things. We talked about him on One in a Million. He's in the Hall of Fame, so that's all we really need to say. Very well known for his magic. Hasn't been with us for 15 years at this point, but I believe he, at least around this neck of the woods, is best known for being on One in a Million. He was also on Madam's Place, because I think he did some magic on Madam's show. And he is, again, one of those people who, whenever he's on TV, is basically the magician type. We talked about him on The Ghostbusters, where he played Merlin. Okay, maybe not a magician, but a wizard. So, sort of in the same family. So, reasonably well-known name there, but also another reasonably known name playing Mrs. Elkins in this episode is Jane Meadows, Mrs. Steve Allen. Episode 17, A Zircon in the Rough.
Sally and John try to groom Jerry for his date with a beautiful sophisticate.
Oh, Jerry is sort of unpolished, if you will, trying to deal with a socialite. So I get it. He's not a diamond in the rough. He's a zircon in the rough. We do have Terry Garr returning in this episode as Amber, but I'm going to guess this is the socialite, and there's a name playing the socialite. Her name is Samantha, and she is played by legendary television actress Joan Van Ark. Valine Ewing on Knots Landing. Again, well-known name from the late 70s through the early 90s. Episode 18, The Sour Grapevine.
John's friends jump to the conclusion that he is having an affair with his secretary.
An affair? Uh-oh.
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 we actually have two names in this episode. We've talked about William Wyndham already. He comes back in this episode. But Greg, you're going to like this first name I'm going to mention because you talked about him earlier this episode, even though I'm pretty sure you didn't know that he was going to appear in this series. Charlie Brill.
Oh my god.
How coincidental is that? He played the Mister in this episode. And if he played the Mister, I bet you can guess who played the Mrs.
Oh, Mitzi McCall, isn't it?
Bingo. So I think that's just a great coincidence. You talked about Charlie Brill earlier on that Rittenhouse trading card, and lo and behold, here he is in this episode, with his wife nonetheless. Episode 19, Irreconcilable Sameness.
After 30 years of marriage, Sally's parents are separating and re-entering the single scene.
I see one name in this episode, and I'm going to guess that this person played Sally's mom, just based on the age, and I could see her playing a mom in this episode. Playing Margaret is Audra Lindley, Helen Roper. Y'all know Helen Roper from Three's Company and then the Ropers. And oh, by the way, since I think I've mentioned it, there's an 80s sitcom flashback channel on Plex, and they show the Ropers seemingly like all day. It's actually a very good show. Yes, it only ran for 2 seasons, but we're going to talk about that later this year because we're going to be revisiting it. Not going to tell you when, but there's a certain time, a special time that we're going to be revisiting it. And presumably playing her husband, William, is Donald O'Connor. And Donald O'Connor is an old school actor in Hollywood. Did some TV in his later years, talking about 70s, 80s, and 90s. But he goes all the way back to the 30s. His first movie was 1937. And among the movies he was in, the well-known names, if you will, he was in Singing in the Rain, Call Me Madam, a lot of old school Hollywood movies. That'll take us to episode 20. We've got 3 more to go. And speaking of 3, episode 20 is titled 3 for the Road.
The Burton's Vacation becomes a comedy of errors.
See, I don't see any ESP here, so I'm guessing they sort of turned it into a generic sitcom because there's only so much stuff you could do with ESP.
Yeah, they've given up at this point.
The ratings will concur, and we'll talk about that after we get done with the episodes. The second to last episode is episode 21, called The Not So Good Samaritan.
The Burtons make a new friend in Lionel, who is an incurable loser who lacks self-confidence. He does a good turn, but it results in him losing his job. Sally tries to help him, but his misfortunes are only beginning as a series of calamities continue in his life.
We do have 2 names in this episode. We have Terry Garr again as Amber, and we have Stephanie Edwards again as Angela. But 2 names. Playing the incurable loser, if you will, in this episode. His name is Lionel, and I think this is perfect casting if you want an incurable loser, given some of the movies he's done. Don Knotts. Again, if we have to mention Don Knotts, who he is. You're very young, or you don't watch a lot of TV and old movies. Yeah, we just talked about Helen Roper earlier. Don Knotts replaced Mr. Roper on Three's Company. He was Mr. Furley.
That's right.
But of course, I think we can take it a step further. We all know he was Barney Fife on Andy Griffith's show. And The Incredible Mr. Limpet, and so many movies, especially back in like the 60s.
Now, Mike, hold on a second. I just changed my background. Do you want to see what my background is now?
Okay. In honor of Gordon Jump, for better or for worse, it's Arnold and Gordon Jump at the bike shop. The bike was $199.99. Good heavens, prices were expensive back in the 80s. Yeah, that's my takeaway. Not that Gordon Jump wants to do things with Arnold and Dudley. I'm looking at the price of the bike. Good heavens. But again, we do have another name in this episode beyond Don Knotts playing Eleanor. And this is a person we've mentioned. She's done a lot of stuff. And honestly, I can't even like pinpoint her to one role. But playing Eleanor in this episode is Arlene Galanka. She, again, did a little bit of everything. Did TV, did movies. And I don't know if we mentioned this in this episode when we covered it, but she did a week of The New Liars Club back in 1988. I think we could say who didn't do The New Liars Club back in 1988. Everybody did it. Especially Jimmy Walker, because he needed the
Money.
And that's going to take us to the final episode, Hallelujah. And the final episode is called The New Broom.
A political reform group asks John to be its candidate for city council.
John Davidson is a politician? Okay. And we do have a name in this episode. Playing Mr. Morgan is Dick Van Patten. Of course, we know him from Eight is Enough and all of the Van Patten kids, because we've talked about Timothy Van Patten in the past, and I'm sure we've talked about Vince Van Patten, at least with his work on World Poker Tour. So a well-known name, to say the least, outside of Eight is Enough. I'm going to throw one more name out. Not necessarily a known name, but I saw the name, and it looked familiar to me for some reason. I think because he's one of those people who did a lot of stuff back in the 60s and 70s and 80s. Playing Mr. Brannigan in this episode is Arch Johnson. Again, not a person we can pinpoint to one role, but if you look at his IMDb, he's done a lot of stuff from 1953 up until 1990, and he passed in 1997. But again, that name rings a bell. I just can't say he was known for this. And again, looking at his IMDb, he had like one or two series where he was in most, if not all, the episodes, but he did a little bit of work on one or two or three episodes of a number of series. So that's the series. Where did it go wrong? Well, as I said earlier, watching a few of these episodes, it just wasn't funny. But also, after a certain point, it looks like the ESP factor, which is like the one thing that made this TV show unique, it sort of got pushed to the side. And it was just a bland, basic comedy from the mid-70s or early 70s. And if we take a look at the ratings, I can tell you the ratings were not that good. It was bound to be a one-and-done series, and it was. So out of 80 shows in the 1973-74 primetime season, this ranked 59th. So right on the cusp of being bottom quarter. That explains why it didn't get a second season. But if you take it a step further and look at the schedule definitely paints a picture as well, because it went up against some tough competition. But it did have a good time slot to start. To start, this aired on Friday nights at 8:30 p.m. on NBC. Just after a little show that would have been in its third season at this point, I believe, called Sanford and Son, which was obviously a ratings winner. It was third in terms of ratings in 1973-74. So it followed Sanford and Son at 8:30, and the competition on CBS was a series called Rollout, which is on the list, and I want to cover it because it was supposed to be sort of like MASH, since MASH was like the big new series in 1972. But there's some stories about what led to its cancellation, specifically the star of its show and what that person did in a restaurant owned by a very famous celebrity. It's a Gilbert Gottfried story from his podcast. Very funny. But we'll save that for when we cover Rollout. If we do. Hopefully we do. But on ABC, and this would have been the second to last season of this show, and even if the ratings weren't that good, still, This is a series that ran for 5 years or so. The Odd Couple. We're talking OG Odd Couple. So we're talking Jack Klugman and Tony Randall. So that probably didn't work out too well ratings-wise, especially since Rollout was supposedly like a halfway decent show. It's just, again, the story about its lead star and a certain restaurant, which we'll hopefully get to one day. But then the show got moved half an hour later. It moved to 9 p.m. on Fridays. So now it's half an hour after Sanford and Son ends. And actually the show that got slotted between Sanford and Son and The Girl with Something Extra, something we covered in the past. Lots of luck. Now at 9 o'clock, what The Girl with Something Extra went up against on CBS, it went up against first half hour of a Friday night movie. But against ABC, The Odd Couple was not much competition, but it was still a good show. But this is going to knock you out in 1973-74. The second half hour of The $6 Million Man. And actually, I should add that $6 Million Man for this season for 73-74 was the 11th rated show. And actually, the CBS Friday night movie was 19th. So technically, you went up against two top 20 shows. You're not going to beat two top 20 shows, especially when the series is lackluster at best. And really, again, you deviate from the main topic of the show. It's no longer about ESP. It's just a bland sitcom. And I'm guessing between the tough competition on CBS and ABC, but also the sort of loss of the key format that it was trying to draw viewers in, The Girl with Something Extra, unfortunately, it just became a thing on TV.
We didn't get anything extra out of this show. But we're going to get something extra because we got the Match Game Hollywood Squares Hour update.
It's time for This Weekend Match Game. Hollywood Squares Hour History. What a transition. Thank you, Greg. So we're in week 32 of the series, and we're in the final 2 months, for better or for worse, depending on how much you enjoy this TV show. And in the squares this week, we have Bruce Baum, Carrie Michelson, Marilyn Michaels, William Christopher, Fannie Flagg, Tim Reed, Teresa Ganzel, and Robert Donner. Again, a lot of returning players. In terms of happenings this week, we did have Rich Jeffries fill in as an announcer this week. The telephone match has returned. We talked about it a while ago that once it got the renewal for the last 13 weeks, the telephone match was returning, and they actually started the second round of the telephone match this week. We did have a winner of the at-home telephone match on Monday and Wednesday and Thursday, but didn't win on Tuesday and Friday. In terms of big money wins this week, believe it or not, 5 big money wins this week. Everybody won big money this week. On Monday, there was a $10,000 win with John. On Wednesday, there was a $7,500 win with Carrie. On Thursday, $20,000 with John. On Friday, $2,500 with Fannie Flagg. But I saved the best for last, the biggie. Bruce Baum won a contestant $30,000 on the Tuesday episode. Looking ahead to next week, week 33, looks like there are going to be quite a few returning players, possibly 1 or 2 new faces. We'll talk about that in the next episode, but for now, let's close everything out. Before we go, there's one more thing we need to do because it's been a while since we talked about this person because he was injured, but he has now returned. So I think it's time for a Joey Gallo update.
Yay! But a Zulu, Joey Gallo, he can't hit over 200, but he can sure smack a ball over the fence. It's the Joey Gallo update.
So I think we did our last update when we recorded on the 17th of May, which would have been a Friday. And he's been playing for the most part, and he has not been doing all that well, surprisingly. So he did get a hit on that return game on the 17th of May, and then he got another hit on the 19th of May against the Phillies in a loss. And then he played against his old team from last year, the Minnesota Twins. The next day, May 20th, he got a hit and won 12-3 against the Twins. And then he went hitless up until playing Seattle on the 25th of May, which was a Saturday. But then he started a little bit of a hot streak here. He had the hit against Seattle on the 25th. On the 26th, he went 1 for 4. On the 27th against Atlanta, in Atlanta, he went 1 for 4. And then he went 2 for 4 against Atlanta on Wednesday, the 29th. So his average is now 147. And actually, it went down, I believe, a hair because he did go, I think, 0 for 1 today against the Guardians. But also, he did have a home run. That hit against Seattle was a home run. So, yeah, his average is 147. His slugging is 310. And again, he didn't even start today against the Guardians. So I'm just wondering if it's a matter of time before he gets released. Well, for better or for worse, that's the Joey Gallo update. Now I think we can start wrapping everything up. It's time to tell you to please remember, you can always go to our website at itwasathingontv.com, where you can find the 476 episodes that preceded this one. That's almost 500 episodes. We're going to have 500 in about 4 months. That's going to be a fun time. And please remember, not just the episodes that are there, but everything else. The before the show stuff, the presents, the live shows, the minisodes. Plenty of things there to keep you busy. And also, please remember, in terms of social media, we are on social media almost everywhere. Not that one site run by Elon Musk. It was the thing on TV. But please remember, Facebook, you need to put in It Was the Thing on TV podcast. And also, please remember, if you want to follow us on Mastodon, you need to do a search at It Was the Thing on TV at tvwatch.party. And also, please do remember that you can find us on any worthwhile podcast player, including Apple Podcasts, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, Audible, independent podcast players. We're everywhere, it seems. And please do not forget, we are also on YouTube, where you can like and subscribe to our channel. And please don't forget to hit that notification bell to stay informed of all future uploads on the channel, including what is coming up on the podcast next week. Back in December, I believe, we had a little election vote, if you will. Not really an election day because we didn't do it election day, but you guys voted on what show we're going to cover. And what show do we cover, Greg? Do you remember?
Briscoe County Jr. covered last year.
And in that vote, Briscoe County Jr. ended up actually being tied with another show. And if you don't know, around here, the shows that we put up for vote, we're going to cover them sometime in the next year. And I know, obviously, we covered Briscoe County Jr. back in December, I do believe. We'll cover Chico's submission for the vote in September. But next week, we're going to cover my submission. And my submission is an interesting concept, to say the least. What if you combined the Muppets, or at least the relatives of the Muppets, if you will, not the Muppets themselves per se, but in the Muppet family, with a game show? So your host is a Muppet, and all the celebrities are Muppets, but the contestants are celebrities, actual human celebrities. Hilarity is sure to ensue. I mean, who doesn't like the Muppets? Who doesn't like the Muppet Show? And yeah, it's National Game Show Day as we record this, June 1st. So who doesn't like a good game show? This one didn't last all that long. But the thing is, even though it didn't last all that long, you can still see it nowadays, free of charge. We'll explain how next week, right here at It Was a Thing on TV. Thank you, Greg. And Chico, wherever you're at, thank you very much for your assistance. Please stay safe. And we will catch you next Thursday with that episode.
Wow!
The girl was something extra. What do you call a girl whose measurements are 32, 24, 36, and 9?
That's a penis.